It's warm out there, but lovely and cool in here. And it is such a pleasure to welcome all of you to St Andrew's Church this evening. And those of you who are regulars, hello again. And those of you who are irregulars, hello, and I look forward to seeing you again, especially on Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock. But it is a great pleasure and joy to have you, and also to welcome those who may be joining us at a distance via Facebook or YouTube or some of those other technological marvels that I know nothing about, but welcome. As I've said at other evenings, these gatherings are not quite worship, not quite concert, they're somewhere in between, and I hope that you'll enjoy them. Sadly, in a way, you have to keep your mask on, but we will stand at some stage to sing a hymn, and you are invited to sing behind your mask, and that's good. A particular welcome to Elisha. Did I do that? Zanderman? Zanderman, yes. As our special guest tonight, our soloist, and it's a delight to meet you again, and to also welcome Elisha's husband, Hank, who is going to play the piano at some stage, but James will introduce them more seriously later on. Welcome to you. We're looking forward to this very much. You've got your program notes in front of you, and you've got an image of Rembrandt's painting on the other side. You will need that later on, so just keep it handy. If you need to use a washroom, please exit front, and the washroom over in that corner over there, so that's fine. Before you leave tonight, you're invited, if you're able, to give an offering toward the music ministry of St Andrew's Church. And there's a box sitting there, and a box sitting there. We've got both doors covered. And if you want to have a tax receipt for your gift, then there's little blue envelopes around on the pews. You can put your gift into that and just write your name and address, I think would be helpful, and put it in the envelopes. I mentioned that Sundays we meet for worship at 11 o'clock. If you're not participating in any other congregation, then come. You'll be very, very welcome to join us for worship on Sunday mornings. Next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock is our fourth and final August gathering. And next week we have a saxophonist joining us. And so that will be quite different again, I suspect. And I hope you'll be invited, you will feel invited to come back to that. And then finally, let me just say some thanks again to the Gateau group who are busy putting cakes away or hiding cakes for me, so nobody else gets it. They're doing that right now, so thank you to the Gateau gang, to the setup gang, and there's various people helping to do that, and also the publicity gang, I see them over here. And a particular thank you to James, our music gang of Soul, who's been doing a lot of the work. We appreciate all that you've done very, very much indeed. I think that's our introductions and announcements, and we're going to hand it over to the musicians for a little while.
Thank you, Clyde. I'm so happy to be here, and happy that I was invited to sing with you. The first piece that we'll be doing is a medley of the Sound of Music. So I would love to invite any children that are here to perhaps come up here and partake in a couple of the songs in it. Would you like to come up? I see some are shy. How about the girls back there? They're coming. Lily, here, come. Come on up. So, growing up, Julie Andrews was one of my favorite singers and quite an influence on me as I began my singing career. Here, come on up. You can come over here. And with the Sound of Music, we're doing a medley of The Hills Are Alive, so the Sound of Music. My favorite things, which I'm not sure if any of you have seen the sound. Oh, good. That's really helpful. Do, re, mi. I'm hoping everyone knows that because everyone will be the children during this. So I'll need all of you to sing with me. And then we will end it with Climb Every Mountain. Do you want to sing it? Right here. chair, sorry. Oh, and I say barefoot, so don't laugh. So, during the do, re, mi, if I go like this, I would like you to sing that part. Who here is not seeing The Sound of Music? Oh, good. Okay, so it should be very loud.
To
And this was the first Italian opera that was set for an English stage back in 1711. The story takes place in Jerusalem, where Almirena and Rinaldo, they fell in love. And there's an evil sorceress who abducts Almirena. Almirena is heartbroken and believes that she will never see the love of her life, Rinaldo, again. I will translate the words for you, since I'll be singing it in Italian, what it was written in. Armida, cruel fortune with a power inhuman, withdraw my heart from heaven and my contentment, and here with grief eternal living, it holds me in torment most infernal. O Lord, I pity, hear me. Tears will relieve me. Let me weep my cruel fate, and that I should have freedom. The jewel and fringes within these twisted places, in my sufferings, I crave for mercy. Lascia Hyokganga.
Isn't she great? I didn't know I was going to be able to make it through that last piece. So here we are for the third week. Lovely to see so many same faces again, and also so many new faces. I just wanted to say a few words about Emisha and introduce her in a little more detail. You of course have her bio in the program. There were some things in there that I didn't know prior to reading it when they sent it to me a few days ago, that she had sang with John Tuttle and music great in Toronto, and so always new things. It's been a real pleasure working with Emisha. She's put me through my paces, and I think me, her too. So, yes. And so we've met a number of years ago, and some of you at St. Andrews have seen her or heard her at least twice here on Sunday, as recently as last week. And I'm always very thankful for her presence and creating that sparkle in the choral sound that we tried to make here. And also a special welcome to her husband, Hank. I was like, if you got one, maybe you got a 2-for-1 deal. And he agreed, so you'll hear from him playing the piano a little bit later on, and his own last verse arrangement. As you probably know from the prior evenings, each week I'm playing a brand new piece of music, an organ solo that was composed during the pandemic. And this week is no different. The piece is called Jubilation in C by Wayne Wold. Wayne is a prolific composer, musician, church musician from the US. And I didn't know much about him until coming to this piece. I mentioned him to some of my other colleagues, and they had heard of him. But he is most well known by the place where he served as music director for almost 17 years, which was the chapel at the Presidential Retreat in Camp David. And so here's a piece from him. And so it's, the piece, as I mentioned, is Jubilation in C, and it came from a composition competition that was done during COVID, and it comes from an album, Organ Music for Joyful Moments. Last week was Organ Music for Quiet Moments, and that was the winning piece in that competition. This is the winning piece for Joyful Moments. So it features the trumpet stop on the organ very, very proudly, and it's right out there, you can't miss it. The trumpet stop on this particular organ is very much in the room, so it's sometimes hard to temper, but not tonight. And so it starts off in a C major mode, but it keeps moving back and forth, and apparently these melodies came to Wayne as he was walking through the forest, and I'm imagining during COVID and stuff like that, there would be times of joy walking through the scenery, and then you also hear the minor modes and different modulations happening in there that probably put his feet back on the ground and realizing where we were, and he was at that time, and where we all have been in this past pandemic in the last 18 months. So here's Jubilation in C by Wayne Wold.
next piece that we will be performing is Bach's Bist du bei mir. Since James brought up Mr. John Tuttle, I was in the Canadian Children's Opera course when I had learned this back when I was 8, so many, many years ago. Don't laugh, James. He thinks I'm older than he is, so he's laughing at me. I've always loved this piece, so I thought I would bring it to you and make James learn something else. And right after that, my wonderful husband, Hank, is joining us on the piano for Abide with Me.
falls in. It's just the most appropriate, beautiful sound. So thank you very much. We're all going to sing now. You get a chance to leave the pew behind for a few moments and to sing together a hymn of great joy and praise. Number 410 in the big, it's the bigger of the blue books in front of you, the hymn book, 410, Joyful, Joyful, we adore you. You've had Gateau earlier, and you've had Grace conveyed to you music, beautiful music. Some Grace words now in words. At this third gathering for Gateau and Grace, as with first and second gatherings, we're looking at Rembrandt's painting of Jesus' story of the prodigal son. And if you've got your card in front of you, you might want to put it in front of you. The painting, a print of the famous painting of Rembrandt's interpretation of the prodigal son parable that Jesus told, recorded in Luke chapter 15. I'm not going to read it again this week. Most of you know it. Who wants to confess they don't know the story of the prodigal son? If you are, you're a heathen. It is, of course, the story of an unhappy son who asks his father for half of the family estate, only to subsequently squander it in what the text says, wild living. Homesick and hungry, he finally and eventually crawls home to his father, pleading for pardon. Rembrandt paints the scene very tenderly, and you can see the father greeting this emaciated-looking, prodigal, pardoned son on the left hand of the painting. Last week I focused on the elder son in the painting and in Jesus' story, who stands stiffly on the right hand. He had stayed home. He had played by the rules, and he was absolutely horrified when his father threw a welcome party for his returned wayward wastrel of a son. If Rembrandt paints the prodigal here receiving grace, he also paints the brother, the elder brother on the right-hand side, resisting grace. He stands back in the shadows, clenched hands. Two sons of the same father, and yet very different. One repentant, the other resentful. Very different siblings. And those of you who are parents will know what that feels like. They can be chalk and cheese, can't they? Sure, parents can influence their children, but parents cannot control their children or their choices, as if they were robots, because the fact, of course, is that we all have a will of our own. And so in Jesus' story, as the younger son leaves, his father respects his freedom and lets him go. And later, when the elder son refuses to welcome the returned prodigal, again the father listens with great respect to that son's angry accusations. The Bible, of course, has more to say about God than what's in this story. But Jesus seems to be suggesting, I think, in the parable, that like the Father, God, the God who seeks us, respects our freedom and therefore does not coerce us. And as to the Father, I want to turn for a few moments. He's the third major character in the painting. And I want to notice how Rembrandt paints him. Henry Nouwen, the famous Dutch Jesuit priest, wrote a small book after he had studied this painting. The painting, by the way, is 8 feet by 6. It's vast. And hangs in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. I was just hearing tonight that the National Gallery in Ottawa is having a Rembrandt exhibition. But sadly, this painting hasn't come to Ottawa. Otherwise, we would all head up there. Henry Nouwen, in his book on this painting, notes how Rembrandt uses light to emphasize the Father's hands. And looking closely at those hands, says Nouwen, you'll see that the left hand is masculine and the right one feminine. It's a mother's hand, he says. And in painting it that way, says Rembrandt is echoing this biblical insight that God's love is both motherly and fatherly. And just to remind you of such an insight, it shows up in Isaiah 45, where the text says, "Can a woman forget her nursing child, or show no compassion for the child of her womb? Even they may forget, yet I, God, will never forget you. That verse likens God's love to that of a fierce, protective mother for her children. But there's more to God's love in this story of Jesus. For God not only welcomes us when we come back to him, but he actually goes seeking us when we don't. As we have looked at other weeks, the prodigal son used his freedom to escape from his father. And the elder son uses his freedom to complain to his father angrily, accusing his father. And yet in Jesus' parable, the father never gives up on either son. In fact, Jesus says that while the prodigal was still far off, his father saw him and, filled with compassion, ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And similarly, when the angry elder son refused to join the party to celebrate his brother's return, the text says the father went out to plead with him to come in. The father didn't give up on either side, even though they must have hurt him badly. When someone hurts me, I typically withdraw to nurse my wounds. Do you do that? But not God. Not according to Jesus. God reaches out to those who reject him, whether they're repentant or not. God, in a sense, God's love doesn't discriminate. We discriminate with our love. We care for those who care for us, but not so much for those who don't. Isn't that the way it is? Indeed, others may reject us and write us off, but God doesn't. And that's a good definition of grace. When others write us off, God doesn't. This story, this prodigal son story, says Henry now, speaks of a love that existed before any rejection was possible, and that will still be there after all rejections have taken place. Now let me ask this question. Does God love us in the way that Jesus says the Father loved these two sons? My response to that is to ask the question, who's telling the story? And the person telling the story, of course, here is Jesus. And when Jesus tells us that God seeks us, he tells it because he himself came to seek us. And when Jesus tells the story to make the Father represent a God who loves us, we can believe him. Because Jesus came to die, to remove every barrier between us and God. So what would that look like? What does it mean to experience God's love? Rembrandt, interestingly enough, paints the Father here, and notice it. He paints the Father as a wealthy man with a marvelous red cloak. It's also shared with another red cloak by the elder son. They're well-off folk. And in the background you'll find servants half hidden in the shadows. What Rembrandt is suggesting, following Luke chapter 15, is that God loves lavishly. We don't need to be afraid that God is stingy. After all, when the prodigal returned, he was given a robe, remember, a ring, shoes for his feet, and a fatted calf. I want to mention those shoes for a moment. Not that many generations ago, there were quite a few Canadian children who didn't have shoes. Such that getting a pair finally was a sign that you'd left poverty behind. Across the globe right now, there are many children that still walk barefoot, unable to afford shoes. And that makes me recall the old Negro spiritual, written by barefooted American slaves generations ago. The song echoing Luke 15, this story, pictures what will be like. What will it be like to be in God's presence? What does it mean to be loved by God? What does it mean to finally look forward to being enveloped in God's grace? And this is the Negro spiritual. I'm not going to sing it, by the way. But it goes like this. And you know it. I got a robe. You got a robe. All God's children got a robe. When I get to heaven, I'm going to put on my robe. I'm going to shout all over God's heaven. I got shoes. You got shoes. All God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, I'm going to put on my shoes. I'm going to walk all over God's heaven. Amen.
Amen.
We have something else to come, haven't we? Yes, Soprano.
So the last piece is titled Jubilate Deo, a transcription on Psalm 100, O be joyful in the Lord. And after what we just heard, the lavish love of the Father, I think we can be that, joyful in the Lord.
Oh, be joyful here.
I'm going to invite you to stand for a blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.